Madam President, this weekend, Vanderbilt plays Tennessee in a football game in Knoxville. And let's say Vanderbilt gets on the 1-yard line of Tennessee. And Tennessee then says, well, we're the home team. Let's add 20 yards or whatever it takes to win the game. Or let's say in the World Series recently, the Red Sox were behind St. Louis in the 9th inning, and the Red Sox said, well, we're the home team, let's add a couple of innings or whatever it takes to win the game. Everyone, I think, would say, Madam President, that that's cheating. Everyone would say you're destroying the game of football or baseball. If a home team could change the rules at any time during the game, or whatever it takes to win the game, what kind of game is it? That's what Senator Vandenberg said after World War II, and Senator Levin repeated to all of us, that a Senate in which a majority can change the rules anytime the majority wants to change the rules is a Senate without any rules. Yet we hear that's what the Democratic majority may be seeking to do this week. They're unhappy, they say, that Republicans have said it's premature to vote up or down on 3 circuit judges nominated by President Obama, even though that was exactly the position of the Democratic senators in 2006 and 2007, when they argued that the D.C. Circuit Court is underworked and that we should transfer judges from where they're needed the most, from the least to where they're needed the most. So we're going to change the rules of the game during the game or whatever it takes to get the results we want. We have a lot of new senators, Madam President, on both sides of the aisle. Maybe half the Senate is in its first term. It's important for them to remember that in Senator Reid's book, he said that to do this would be the end of the United States Senate. That Senator Robert Byrd, probably the most distinguished Senate historian in its history, said in his last speech to us that the filibuster is the necessary fence against the excesses of the majority and of the executive. It is the fence against what de Tocqueville called in the early 1830s the greatest danger to our country he saw, which was the tyranny of the majority. Now you may ask, how could this possibly happen? Here's how I'm afraid it is. Sometimes we get off in our rooms by ourselves, and Republicans do it as well as Democrats, and we give ourselves our own version of the facts. The last time this came up, we tried to address this in the Senate chamber. I think all of us thought it was a pretty good session. But this is my 3rd time to respond to these nuclear threats, and I'm not going to do it again, Madam President. The President said during the government shutdown that he wasn't going to negotiate with a gun to his head, neither am I. The Democrats have had their finger on the nuclear button for 2 years. I hope they'll reconsider. Number one, I hope they'll read Senator Leahy's letter, which I ask unanimous consent to put in the record.
Without objection.
It was signed in 2006 and 2007 by all the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Leahy, Senator Feinstein, Senator Kennedy, Senator Biden, Senator Schumer. It said under no circumstances should we add a judge to the D.C. Circuit when it's so underworked. And so the Republican president and the Democratic Senate agreed with that, reduced by 1 judge. It's the same argument being made today. Number 2. Any suggestion that the president's nominations are being held up is completely wrong. I invited the Congressional Research Service into my office. I asked that question. They've said no. President Obama's nominations in his 2nd term are being considered at about the rate of those of President Clinton and President George W. Bush. On every senator's desk is an executive calendar. Every person who could be confirmed by the Senate is on this calendar. They're about 11 pages. The one who's been on there the longest goes back to February, but all the rest of them go back just to September 12th, just a few weeks. Most of them have been there just 3 or 4 weeks. So, Madam President, people aren't being held up. The only person who can be reported to the Senate floor is by a Democratic committee. The only person who can bring them from the calendar to be confirmed is the Democratic leader. Why doesn't he bring them to the floor and let them be confirmed? And in the history of the Senate, Madam President, and this is from the Congressional Research Service, there have only been 16 executive nominees in its history who have failed to be seated because of a filibuster vote, a failed cloture vote. There have been 2 under the Clinton administration, 2 in the Bush administration, 2 in the Obama nomination. There have been 5 Bush circuit judges and 5 Obama circuit judges. Never a Supreme Court justice. There was a little exception with Abe Fortas, which was different. Never a district court judge, and never a cabinet member denied a seat by a filibuster. So where's the crisis? Madam President, in conclusion, I would make this suggestion. I think what makes Americans angry about Obamacare is the wrong direction, is the 3,000-page bill, but as much as anything else, is the raw exercise of political power in the middle of the night during a snowstorm to pass a bill by a partisan vote without a single bipartisan vote. If the Democrats proceed to use the nuclear option in this way, it will be Obamacare II. It will be the raw exercise of political power to say we can do whatever we want to do. Grantland Rice, a famous sports writer, once said, "It's not whether you win or lose, it's how you play the game." In this case, it's not so much what the rule is, it's how you change the rule. There have always been a few senators on either side of the aisle who care enough about our institution and enough about our constitutional checks and balances to stop a stampede that we will later regret. I hope that will be true again. I hope we will resist turning the Senate into an institution where the home team can cheat to win the game, to get whatever result it wants at any time it wants. Because as Senator Vandenberg said, and Senator Levin has repeated, a Senate where a majority can change the rules anytime it wants is a Senate without any rules at all. I ask consent to include a one-page summary of the 16 nominations that have been not confirmed after a failed cloture vote, which according to the Congressional Research Service is the entire number in the history of the United States Senate that have ever been denied their seat by a filibuster.